I never thought the night could feel so alive. The streetlights along the old patrol route flickered like dying candles, casting shadows that stretched and warped across the cracked asphalt. Fog slithered between the trees at the edge of the forest, and every step I took seemed to echo louder than it should. The hum of the distant highway felt intrusive, yet strangely comforting, until it vanished entirely. I had been alone on night patrol for hours, the world asleep around me. The only sound to rustle of leaves and the occasional drip of water from unseen branches. Then I saw it, something standing just beyond the edge of the light, pale and still, watching. My pulse slowed, my breath shallow. It didn't move like a human, yet it seemed patient. My radio crackled with static, the low buzzing filling the empty silence. And I realized I hadn't felt this much unease in years. I told myself it was nothing, just fatigue playing tricks. But deep down, I knew otherwise. There was something there, something waiting. And then, just as I thought I might gather the courage to look closer, it shifted, slightly impossibly, as though it didn't belong to the world I knew. That's when I saw it. The fog was thick tonight, low and curling, heavy at ankle level. It smelled faintly of wet earth and something older. Each step pressed into silence, broken only by the soft scrape of my boots. The streetlights struggled through the mist, halos trembling. Shadows pooled like spilled ink, deeper than they should be. I noticed the fog first. It didn't just sit there. It wrapped around the lampposts, lingered on the corners of crates, curling like fingers. I thought I imagined it. The edges of my vision flickered with movement, quick, too smooth, a shape that glided, but never fully showed itself. The night hummed low, a pulse in my ears. Static, almost like air held in suspense. I stopped. The mist moved slower when I stopped. A whisper followed me, soft, broken, almost too quiet to hear. I tilted my head. Silence answered. Then it was there again, brushing past my thoughts, a syllable I couldn't hold. Street signs blurred in the fog. I could smell damp wood, something sharp, metallic. The corners of my eyes caught shadows that were wrong, deeper than the absence of light. A lamppost flickered. The hum of electricity wavered, stretched thin. I saw it then, at the edge, a shimmer, like a reflection on disturbed water, sliding just out of reach. I tried to focus, but the fog swallowed the detail. It moved like smoke, but with purpose, around crates, along walls, curling over cracks in the pavement, almost waiting. My breath was loud in my ears. The mist clung to it, curling in soft rings before vanishing. I imagined hands brushing my arms, cold and wet, but I was alone. Footsteps, mine or not, echoed in a strange rhythm. The pavement seemed to tilt, edges bending slightly where the fog grew thickest. The street lamp halo warped. Shadows shifted, converging where nothing stood. I turned slowly. The movement caught again. Faint, graceful, intentional. A figure? Or just fog pretending to be one. The whisper returned. Closer, brushing against the back of my neck, or inside my skull. It didn't speak words I knew, only the sense of attention, of being followed. I breathed. The night seemed to hold that breath with me. The mist clung tighter, wrapping around my boots, licking at the hem of my jacket. I moved forward, slow. Every shadow deepened, blacker than it had any right to be. The shape at the edge of my sight glided again, silent, impossible. The fog thickened suddenly. My surroundings blurred into nothing but white and gray. The hum of the street lamp felt like it had leaned in to listen. I stopped again, frozen, waiting, and then a pause, a quiet acknowledgement in the air. The fog shifted slightly. I felt it more than saw it. Eyes, somewhere in that white, following patient, still. The whisper vanished. My boots made no sound against wet pavement. The mist rolled past, curling and unrolling, but I knew I was not alone. I walked on, every step measured, careful, almost ceremonial. The night held me in its breath, fog brushing at my shoulders, as if it had waited just for me, and I felt it, watching. The fog sat low between the trunks. Twilight bled through the branches, pale and restless. I stepped softly, the earth damp beneath my shoes. The radio hummed at first, low, almost comforting, then static. Not the kind you tune out. It filled the air, thick and heavy. Each tree I passed looked the same, yet wrong, bark twisted, shadows stretching longer than they should. I thought I recognized the path I'd taken yesterday. But the trees, they didn't end. They never ended. I raised the radio. It crackled. I tried to call out, my voice swallowed by the hum. All I got back was the static, a rhythm, a pulse. Not mine. Branches scraped my arms. Cold, wet, and alive. The smell of moss and decay pressed close to my face. I blinked. The carvings appeared. At first, I thought they were scars from a storm, but they glowed faintly, faint as a heartbeat. Symbols I didn't recognize. Lines that slithered along the bark, moving when I blinked. The radio buzzed. I whispered into it. Again, the same sequence. A signal I couldn't understand, yet I felt it beneath my skin. A vibration I couldn't escape. I paused. A soft humming rose from the shadows. Not mechanical, not from a radio. From the air itself. It filled my ears, my chest, my fingers. I wanted to run, but my legs refused. The forest shifted. No wind moved the leaves, but they rustled anyway. I felt eyes, or imagined them. Each shadow seemed to pulse, breathing slowly. I tried to tell myself it was only imagination, but the carvings watched me. I moved forward, careful, every step tentative. The radio flared with static, a high note like glass against bone. I pressed it closer, desperate. The signal repeated, soft yet insistent. The path twisted. The trees leaned toward me, branches trembling as if alive. I could hear footsteps behind me, but when I turned, nothing, just the glow of the carvings, growing brighter with each heartbeat. A branch cracked, a shadow shifted. I froze. The humming matched the rhythm of my chest now. Faster, closer. I tried to call for help. My voice trembled and broke. The radio repeated, the same chilling signal. Each repetition louder, sharper, yet wordless. I touched the carving. It was warm, pulsing under my fingers. I recoiled. The light spread, faint trails moving along the bark like veins. The air thickened. The smell of wet soil turned sour, metallic. I stepped back. The humming rose. It vibrated through the soles of my feet. Every tree seemed alive, stretching, leaning, watching. The fog curled around my legs. I tried to turn. The forest wouldn't let me. Each step forward felt endless. Each breath dragged through the static. The radio slipped from my hand. It hit the ground. And the hum shifted, closer, soft footsteps brushing against my skin. I couldn't run. The carvings glowed brighter, almost laughing in silence. The forest swallowed everything else. Light, sound, hope. I whispered into the void. The radio answered, not with words, not with help, only the signal. Cold, unbroken, endless. I blinked. The trees, they moved, and the forest whispered back. The night was cold. Fog clung to the asphalt like it didn't want to let go. The lot lay silent, cracked concrete and rusted metal under a pale, watchful moon. I stepped lightly, careful not to disturb the quiet. Every footfall met with its twin echo, sharp, metallic, almost deliberate. Then something else. Footsteps behind the gate, exactly matching mine. I stopped. The chain link trembled with the wind, or maybe it trembled with them. The broken windows along the main building caught my reflection, or thought they did. There was something else. A figure, pale and hesitant, just beyond the glass. It moved a fraction after me. Never quite together, never quite apart. I blinked. It blinked later. A metallic tang lingered in the air, cold and sharp, like rust and old blood. I approached the nearest window. The figure disappeared. The glass only showed me now, alone, but the echo stayed, a soft, dragging rhythm behind the gate. I pressed my hand against the cold chain link. Rusted edges bit my skin. The fog seemed to thicken, pressing against my face and ears. I could feel it curling into my hair, brushing my neck. And the footsteps, they slowed, then stopped. I walked along the edge of the lot, past stacks of pallets and shattered bricks. Each broken window, reflected a different version of me. Some slouched, some stretched unnaturally tall. All pale, all wrong. A faint hum started. Or maybe it had been there the whole time. Metal vibrating somewhere deep under the lot, under my feet. I imagined the figure crouched, watching me through a pane of jagged glass. I thought I heard breathing behind the gate. Soft, uneven, close enough to touch. I whispered, unsure if I was speaking to it or to myself. Nothing answered, only the metallic smell thickening, clinging to the fog. I turned a corner and froze. The reflection in a window ahead had lagged again. It mimicked my posture a second too late. I raised my hand. The figure froze. I lowered it. It moved. Cold. Wet mist drifted from a broken pipe. The smell of iron mixed with damp concrete. The footsteps started again, quicker this time. But the space inside the gate remained empty. I tried calling out. My voice felt wrong in that emptiness, bouncing back as my own echo. I traced the fence line slowly. Every broken reflection caught by the shards of glass was wrong, stretched, pale, distant. I pressed my face close to one pane. I thought I saw eyes, shifting, watching, then gone. The hum rose and fell. The fog settled around my ankles. The lot felt alive. Or maybe it was just me. I stood still. The footsteps stopped again. A shadow flickered across the gate. The metallic smell lingered. I wanted to run, but my legs felt hollow, waiting, and then it was gone. The lot held only its own silence. The broken windows reflected me perfectly now, cold, alone, and breathing shallow. I moved on. The fog followed. The echo did not. The air smelled metallic, cold, damp, like water that hadn't moved for years. Concrete walls rose around me, gray and heavy. The pump station sat abandoned. Its doors groaned when I pushed them open, and inside, shadows lay thick across the floor. I stepped forward. My boots echoed once, then the sound vanished. Something answered with a low breath. Rusted pipes ran along the ceiling. They shivered softly, hissing like quiet voices. I leaned closer. It felt almost like they were whispering my name. The flashlight trembled in my hand. Flicker, darkness, then a pale light shivering over metal. I noticed shapes moving at the edges of the room, shadows stretching tall in the walls. They bent unnaturally, curved like people reaching, but their movements were wrong. The hum of the pumps, or maybe the hum of something alive, filled the stillness. It was faint at first, then growing, insistent, like a pulse under the concrete. I froze. A pipe groaned above me. A soft hiss followed, almost like breathing. The sound brushed my neck. I could feel it waiting, footsteps or echoes of them traced behind me, silent, slow, but closer with every heartbeat. I spun, nothing but shadows. The flashlight flickered again. I blinked. A shape lingered near the far wall. Not quite human, not quite shadow. It leaned and straightened, and I felt its eyes on me, even though it had none. The smell of rust and wet stone thickened. I touched the pipe, cold, alive, trembling slightly, as if acknowledging I was there. I whispered to myself, though my voice felt wrong in this room, "You're just old metal, just pipes." But the echoes laughed back, quiet, high, impossible to locate. A sudden squeal, metal straining. I stumbled. The shadows stretched faster, reaching toward me, then recoiled into corners I didn't see before. The flashlight flared once. I caught the movement of something crouched behind a control panel. It shifted, waiting. I breathed, slowly, feeling the concrete floor under my fingers. The hum settled back to quiet. The whispers faded. Or maybe I just stopped listening. I traced the wall with my fingertips, rust flakes falling like ash. A single pipe groaned above me, and I realized it had been watching me all along. The shadows didn't move anymore. Not quite. They lingered at the edges, tangled with the pale light, as if remembering me. I left the pump station. The doors creaked closed behind me. The cold air hit my face, alive and empty. But even as I walked away, I felt the hum follow, soft, persistent, like something waiting to exhale. The street lamp hummed softly above the creek. Its pale light pooled on the water, casting long fingers across the stones. The air smelled faintly of wet earth, cold and heavy. I stepped carefully onto the slick rocks. Each footfall made a soft splash, small ripples spreading outward. The creek gurgled around my ankles, brushing against my skin. Then I saw it, a figure, dark and still, standing on the far bank. Its outline mirrored in the water, though the reflection shimmered strangely, like oil on rain. It tilted its head, slowly. The motion was wrong. Too deliberate, too human. A shiver crawled up my spine. I blinked. It vanished. The ripples lingered, as if something beneath the water had moved. I froze, feeling the cold press against my legs, the air suddenly thick and heavy in my lungs. The street lamp flickered. A shadow stretched across the water, and I thought I saw eyes, black, unblinking, following me. But when I looked again, nothing was there. I took another step. The creek whispered over the stones. My own breath sounded loud, harsh against quiet. Every instinct screamed to run. But I stayed, pulled forward by curiosity I hated myself for. A soft rustling reached me from the bank, almost drowned beneath the water's murmur. Leaves shifting? Or something else moving in the shadows? The smell of damp wood and something older, decayed, rose to my nose. The figure appeared again, reflected in the creek, as if the water remembered what I could not. Its head tilted just slightly. That motion, the wrong human tilt, made my stomach knot. And then it was gone again, as if the night itself swallowed a whole. I knelt to peer into the water. Ripples carried echoes of movement, whispering across smooth stones. I touched the surface. Cold, empty, but the reflection lingered a moment longer than it should have. The creek hummed beneath my hands. The dark figure seemed suspended in the water's memory, just beyond reach. I shivered. The wind picked up, brushing across my neck, carrying a faint rustle of leaves or something else, sliding softly over the bank. I moved on, stepping carefully, each footfall louder in my own ears and the creek itself. But behind me, the shadows shifted, stretching with impossible length, reaching. I didn't turn. Couldn't. The street lamp flickered again, a pale light trembling over water, over stones, over shadows. I thought I saw the figure one last time, just a silhouette against the bank, tilting its head, waiting, and then it was gone. The creek flowed, indifferent, carrying its small sounds and cold stones onward. I walked on, boots wet, breath shallow, heart drumming in the silence. Every step felt watched, every ripple whispered. And though the figure never appeared again, the memory clung, soft and cold, like fog curling around my ankles. The street was empty. A pale mist hung low, curling around the edges of broken pavement. The lamps flickered, one pulse, then another, soft and uneven. I thought I knew this path. I'd walked it countless nights, each house familiar, yet something had shifted. The corner ahead, it shouldn't be there. Or maybe it had been there before, and I never noticed. The brick wall that guided me home last week was gone. In its place, a narrow alley that smelled of damp decay. My footsteps sounded different. Echoes bounced unevenly, like I was walking through water, though the air was dry. Each step was mine, yet someone else's. Somewhere behind me, I imagined a shadow moving, but when I looked, the mist swallowed everything. I reached a lamppost. Its light was weak, pale, trembling like it had caught its own breath. It illuminated a house, when I remembered, but the windows were wider, darker, and the door hung crooked. I slowed, hoping my mind was playing tricks. The street was twisting now, folding in ways it never should. A familiar bench by the park appeared where a fire hydrant had stood. I passed it, yet when I glanced back, the bench had gone and the hydrant returned. The air smelled faintly of rust and rain, though the clouds above were empty. I touched a brick wall, cold, solid, yet slightly wet. It felt wrong, like it had been stretched. My breathing grew shallow. The footsteps behind me, they matched mine perfectly. At first, I thought it was just the echo, but then the rhythm split, two sets of steps in tandem, then one trailing behind the other, slower, heavier. A shadow flickered across the alley. I froze. It was thin, tall, leaning at impossible angles. No wind, yet the mist moved around it, curling like smoke. I tried to step forward. The street stretched longer, the buildings taller, their edges fraying at the corners. A lamppost swung, though there was no breeze. Its light washed over the cracked pavement, and I saw my own shadow, but it didn't move with me. It lagged. It hesitated. A door creaked somewhere off to the left. Soft, measured. I couldn't tell if it was near or far, inside or outside. I want to call out, but my voice seemed to leak into the fog, swallowed whole before it could echo. Silence pressed in, heavy as water. The street felt alive, breathing around me. I passed a familiar tree. Its leaves shimmered silver in the dim light, but the trunk was hollow, pulsing slowly like it had lungs. I touched it, and the bark shivered under my fingers. A faint hum vibrated through my bones. The path behind me. I glanced back. It was different. A street I had walked a dozen times was now jagged, corners slicing into the mist. The lamp I had passed earlier was nowhere in sight. Everything had moved, shifted, disappeared. My steps quickened, but the echoes stretched, elongating into something unrecognizable. It was as if the street itself was mocking me, folding and unfolding at its whim. Another lamppost ahead, but this one was taller than the last. Its light was faint, greenish, almost sickly. A figure stood beneath it, still, watching. I couldn't see features, only the outline, thin and stretching toward the ground. I turned away, ran, but every street looked the same. Corners bent, sidewalks twisted. Each step returned me to the same lamppost, the same figure, the same hum vibrating in the air. Eventually, I stopped, my chest heaving. The fog wrapped around me, quieting the street. The figure vanished. The lamp stilled. Only my footsteps remained, fading, echoing into nothing. I stayed there, waiting for the path to return, for the world to set itself right. But it didn't. Only the street, breathing, folding, waiting for me to take another step. And I did. One soft step into the fog. One more into the unknown. The fog clung to the trees like damp cloth. It smelled of earth and wet pine, thick between my lungs. The moon hung pale, too still. Branches tapped each other softly. A rustle here, a brush there. My feet made no sound on the mossy ground. Or maybe something else moved before I even noticed. Then I saw it, a tiny glint, fleeting, between two trunks, bouncing in the pale light. I froze. Another spark, then another, scattered across the undergrowth. They moved differently than leaves or water. Patterned, deliberate. I held my breath. Each reflection lingered just long enough for my eyes to catch it. Then it vanished, then returned somewhere else. I began to count them. 4, 7, 11. But they kept multiplying, always at the edge of what I could see, always shifting. I felt their gaze, heavy and patient. Not curiosity, exactly. Something else. Something learning. The fog pressed closer, soaking my hair, my skin. The forest smelled of decay and wet stone. I tried to step back. Something whispered in the rustling leaves, almost like a sigh, or my own heartbeat echoing. I caught movement in my peripheral vision. A shadow flitted, too quick, too precise. It didn't run. It observed. The glints flickered again. They weren't random now. They traced my path, weaving closer with each step. And then they paused, as if waiting. My hands shook, brushing against damp bark. I want to call out, but the fog swallowed my voice. Even the whisper of it seemed to dissolve before reaching anyone, anywhere. I crouched to touch the ground, moss cold and wet under my fingers. Yet, through it, I felt watched. The glints, now faint, reflected on bark, stone leaves, always at angles I didn't expect, always out of reach. A chill ran down my spine. I wanted to leave, but every step forward was mirrored, twisted, like the forest itself had learned to follow me. The patterns shifted, faster now. I blinked. One moment they were in the trees above, next on the forest floor, then in the fog itself. I couldn't focus, couldn't tell what was real. A low hum, soft, almost imperceptible, vibrated through the air. I pressed my ear to a tree. It was nothing. Yet the glints pulsed along with it. I pulled back. They scattered, and then watched from every angle again. I stopped, closed my eyes. The fog smelled stronger, sweeter, like something rotting and alive all at once. I could hear them then. Small, almost metallic taps, following no rhythm I recognized. My skin prickled. I turned slowly, and for a fraction of a second, I thought I saw a face. Pale, shifting between the branches. Gone before I could blink. I tried to focus on the ground. Roots, leaves, wet earth. But the glints were everywhere. And I realized they weren't hiding. They didn't need to. I was the intruder. The forest stretched impossibly deep, mist-rolling between trunks like slow, living breath. Every direction held more eyes than I could count. And in each reflection, a curiosity that felt patient, intelligent. I wanted to whisper, "I mean no harm." But my voice wouldn't leave my throat. The fog seemed to press tighter. The glints shimmered, aligned, almost like they were speaking. I couldn't decipher the message, only feel it. Hours passed, or minutes. I could not tell. Time was slippery here, like wet silk sliding between fingers. Every blink reset the forest. Every breath made the glints pulse. I felt small, alone, but not quite alone. Then the forest exhaled, a soft sigh through the branches, and the glints faded. Not gone, but resting, watching from the shadows, learning, waiting. I stepped back. Roots tangled my feet. The fog brushed my face. I could still smell damp pine and wet earth, still feel the weight of eyes on my back. I didn't run, couldn't run. I simply walked. The forest seemed endless, but I found a path, narrow and uncertain, leading me back to where the mist thinned. And even as the trees receded behind me, the glints lingered, just beyond perception, always remembering. The air smelled old, damp wood, and dust mixed with something metallic. It was late afternoon, though the clouds made it feel darker, heavier. I stepped inside the building. The floorboards groaned under me, soft echoes bouncing off peeling walls. Every breath I took seemed louder than it should be. A hum started, low, almost melodic. It wasn't loud, but it vibrated through my chest, into my bones. I stopped. The hum changed, subtle, as if it were waiting. Curious, I pressed forward. The walls here were stained with years of neglect. Faded paint curled at the edges, flaking in corners. And yet, the hum traveled through them, through every crack. I touched the wall, fingers brushing the rough plaster, cold and damp. The hum responded. It pulsed, gentle, like it knew I was there. I moved deeper. Shadows stretched long and thin under the pale light from the high windows. Each step felt deliberate, like the building was watching. The humming grew softer, then louder, almost whispering in rhythm with my heartbeat. I wondered suddenly if I was intruding, or if I had always been expected. A beam of light caught the dust in the air, suspended, dancing. It flickered over the edges of a door, slightly ajar. I paused, hand hovering near the knob. The hum shifted again, higher, more insistent. I leaned closer, my ear almost touching the wall. It felt alive, breathing, patient. I could smell the rust on some old nails nearby, tangy and sharp. The floor felt uneven beneath my shoes, as if I were sinking into something unseen. Every sense was alert, and yet I couldn't pull away. A shadow moved, or maybe I imagined it, a darker smear against the faint gray walls. The hum reacted, bending and twisting in the silence. It almost hummed at me, not through the building, but inside me. I stepped back, the floor groaning again, and the hum softened, like it was teasing me, coaxing me forward. The more I listened, the more my curiosity tangled with fear. I brushed my hand along the wall again. The plaster felt like skin in some places, warmer than it should be, rough in others. I could almost hear faint whispers layered under the hum. Words I couldn't catch, but tones I recognized. Recognition that made my stomach twist. I realized I couldn't tell where I ended, and the building began. The hum seemed to guide me, weaving between corners and beams. I crouched to peer through a broken window, seeing nothing but fog and pale light outside. Inside it felt alive, waiting. The air shifted, colder now, carrying the smell of something rotting beneath the floor. I shivered, though not from cold alone. The hum continued, slow, deliberate, almost patient. I moved to leave, yet the building seemed to resist. Each step toward the door felt heavier, like wading through invisible water. The hum pulsed in time with my steps. Closer now. I paused, listening, breath held. It was behind the wall, not inside the wall, not even in the room. It was everywhere and nowhere, humming for me, at me, through me. I realized then that the hum wasn't just a sound. It was an invitation, a warning, a question, and perhaps, in some quiet, unknowable way, I was the intruder. I stepped outside. The door creaked shut behind me, soft and final. The hum lingered, faint, almost apologetic. Outside, the fog swirled low over the cracked pavement. I could still feel it, humming in my chest, a memory I didn't want but couldn't forget. And I knew, even if I never returned, it would always be waiting. The street was empty. Autumn air hung heavy, damp with fog curling along the pavement. Leaves rustled quietly, but every step I took made no sound at all. Above me, a streetlight shivered. Flicker, darkness. Flicker again, pale, trembling light spilling across the cracked asphalt. And then I saw it, a figure, still, too still, under the halo of weak illumination. It didn't move, yet somehow it existed in every shadow around me. Flicker, closer. My chest tightened. The fog pressed in, wet against my skin, smelling of wet earth and cold metal. I tried to breathe, but the air felt thick, like the night itself was holding me. Flicker, closer. I forced my legs forward. Pavement stretched beneath me, stretching like it would never end. The streetlight wavered again, revealing the figure a little nearer. Each blink it had moved, slowly and possibly. Flicker, closer. I stumbled, my foot scraping against damp asphalt. The world smelled of rain, or maybe of something older, something that had been here before me. The leaves rustled behind, whispering, shifting, but no wind touched them. Flicker, closer. I wanted to scream, but my voice stayed lodged in my throat. The figure didn't move its head. It didn't breathe. And yet, I felt its attention pressing on me. Soft, inescapable, like a fog creeping inside my chest. Flicker, closer. The streetlight hummed, low and tired. Shadows twisted along the walls of the buildings. I could feel the darkness stretching around me, a living thing, pulling at the edges of my sight. The figure was there at the corner of my eye, just beyond what I want to see. Flicker, closer. My legs carried me, but the pavement refused to end. Each step felt like sinking, like the ground itself was alive, dragging me backward even as I moved forward. The air tasted of iron and wet stone. The fog curled at my ankles, cold and sticky. Flicker, closer. I risked a glance. It was taller than a man should be. Its eyes, or the absence of them, gleamed faintly, catching the flickering light. Its mouth didn't move, yet I could feel it speaking, a soft hum vibrating in my skull. Flicker, closer. I fell to my knees. The cold seeped through my clothes into my bones. I tried to crawl, to find the end of the street, a place I could disappear. But the asphalt went on forever, curling into shadows, hiding the figure's path until it always reappeared, closer than before. Flicker, closer. I pressed my palms to ground, rough and wet. Every blink of light painted it nearer, a silent predator gliding through time itself. I could smell the fog mixed with something darker, something that belonged to the night, not to me. Flicker, closer. Then a pause. The streetlight buzzed and dimmed. Darkness swallowed it whole. And for a moment, nothing moved. Not the fog, not the leaves, not the figure. A breath, shallow, uneven. I lifted my head. The pavement stretched endlessly in both directions. Empty, silent. The fog rolled in thick now, hiding everything. And then, somewhere ahead, a faint, pale light flickered again. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just waited. The street remembered me. And the figure waited too. The grove smelled of damp bark and decay. The trees were bare, their limbs reaching like brittle fingers. A pale light sifted through the skeletal branches, casting long, trembling shadows. My boots press into the dry, brittle leaves. They crunch beneath me, louder than they should have, though I was careful to step softly. The air shivered. I thought it was the wind at first, a sigh along the trunks, a rustling that twisted higher than any breeze I'd ever known. I stopped. The noise continued, leaves shifting, twisting, scattering, though the trees themselves were still. Something moved. Just beyond the corner of my vision, a shadow twitched. Then another, not the way sunlight bends, or leaves drift. It was deliberate, sinister. I wanted to tell myself it was nothing, but the crunching didn't come from me. The earth whispered under invisible feet. A breath brushed against the back of my neck. I held it, the quiet like a fragile thread. Even the wind seemed to pause. The grove waited. I stepped forward. Twigs snapped somewhat to my left. Closer, too close. The shadows moved again, not like falling leaves. They stretched, condensed, quivering against each other. I could feel them watching. A gust lifted a thin veil of mist. It curled around the trunks, revealing shapes I didn't recognize. They were gone in an instant, yet the echo lingered like a low hum in my chest. I breathed, slow, trying to steady myself. My eyes darted, catching flashes of movement. Branches shivered without wind. The ground quivered beneath the faintest pressure, but no one was there. The rustling changed, not random anymore. It followed, soft steps circling, hesitant but persistent. A rhythm I didn't understand. I knelt to examine a leaf. It quivered. A shadow passed over it. I flinched, my palm pressed into the earth, warm and dry, betraying the cold that crawled up my spine. Silence swallowed the grove. Heavy, expectant, like it was waiting for something. I stood. The shadows paused too. For a moment, I felt part of their stillness. Then a single rustle, near, low, almost affectionate, yet wrong. The wind began again. Or maybe it didn't. The rustling merged with it, impossible to separate. A scent, wet soil, old leaves, faint decay, rose with each inhalation. It clung to me. I walked on, careful, too careful. Every footfall echoed, but other echoes answered, not quite in time, not quite mine. The grove was speaking in leaves and silence. A faint light glimmered against a broken trunk. I looked, and a shadow lingered where none should be. A shape, impossibly thin, stretched across the grove. It recoiled as I blinked. I wanted to run, but my legs stayed rooted, trembling. The rustling circled closer again. Not wind, not animal, something else. I pressed my palms to my ears. But the grove sound didn't care. It seeped in, through my skin, through my bones. I exhaled, and it was gone. The leaves lay still. The shadows folded back into themselves. Only the memory remained. Heavy, quiet, and yet alive. I walked out. The grove behind me whispered once more. I didn't look back, but I could feel it. Every step away was met with soft, deliberate rustling, and the air smelled of decay, waiting, always waiting. The alley was quiet, too quiet. A low fog hung between the walls, pale and wet against my skin. I could see my breath curling, small clouds dissolving too quickly into the darkness. Then it came, a cold gust, sudden, sharper than anything I'd felt. It rolled over me like a hand pressed to my chest. I wanted to pull my jacket tighter, but the air seemed to hold me in place. It carried a whisper, not words I knew, not any language I recognized, just breathy syllables, curling and curling around the brick and trash. I tilted my head, trying to trace it. The mist moved with it, curling into shapes that felt almost aware. My fingers went numb first, then my feet. I shivered, and the fog clung closer. I thought I saw a face, or maybe it was many. Faces formed in the mist, pale and trembling, like shadows caught mid-motion. They lingered, just beyond the reach of the weak streetlight. I blinked. They shifted. I felt eyes on me, even when the shapes disappeared. The air was heavy. It wasn't just cold. It pressed dense, like I could feel the wind brushing my skin from the inside out. My chest tightened, my heart drumming a rhythm too loud for the stillness. A soft rustling came from the alley corner. No footsteps, no shapes, just a subtle movement, like the fog itself had stirred. I froze. My breath hung in the air, solid, fogging again before it vanished. I felt watched, not by one, not by many, but by something patient, lingering, suspended in the cold. It didn't move toward me, but it didn't leave, just waited, shifting the mist, pressing the chill closer. I whispered to myself. Nothing came back, only the soft, curling hiss of the wind. The shadows grew heavier. Walls that were empty before now seemed to bend, curves suggesting faces, mouths opening just a fraction, then closing. I wanted to run, but my legs felt slow, like moving through water I couldn't see. A sudden gust swirled at my feet. The whispers rose with it, closer now, brushing against my ears, brushing my hair, brushing my skin. Words I could not understand, yet they felt important, urgent. I leaned closer, straining, but the air was thicker than thought. Then silence. Complete. My own breath seemed loud in the empty alley. I turned, half expecting movement, eyes straining into the fog. The shadows had flattened, the faces gone. But the weight lingered. The feeling of being observed did not leave. A soft creak from above made me look up. A gutter swung lightly in the wind, a single drop of water, falling onto the cobblestone. I followed its descent, counting the pause before it splashed. 1, 2, 3, my heartbeat drummed along with it. I exhaled, slowly, trying to convince myself it was over, but the air shifted again. Colder this time, deeper, a breath not my own, icy and wet, sliding down my neck. I didn't turn. I didn't move. I just felt it, heavy and patient, like the alley itself was breathing. Shapes returned, faint, almost imperceptible, blending into the fog. Faces not cruel, not smiling, just watching, waiting. I didn't want to see their eyes, but I could feel them. I stepped backward. The ground was slick. My feet meant nothing certain. My hands brushed brick, cold and rough, grounding me, yet still the fog moved around me, curling, pressing, whispering. Then it pulled away just slightly. A final gust, soft, teasing. The whispers faded into nothing. My own breath filled the space again. The alley was empty, silent, normal, almost normal. I didn't run. I didn't turn. I just walked slowly, each step heavy, feeling the cold linger in my lungs, feeling the weight of unseen eyes at the edge of my mind. And I knew the alley remembered me, and it would remember me again. The air smelled damp, like wet earth and moss. Fog clung to the ground, thick and low, curling around my ankles. My footsteps whispered against a gravel path, uneven and soft. A puddle shimmered ahead. I thought it was just rainwater, holding the pale light of the overcast sky. But it wasn't. I knelt, breath shallow. The reflection didn't match me. It twisted long and lean, shadows stretching across its face. Eyes that weren't quite mine stared back. It moved first. A slow tilt of the head, a crooked smile that pulled at something deep inside me. I stepped back. Gravel crunched underfoot. But it didn't stop. The reflection stayed. The fog thickened, wrapping the trees in ghostly arms. Branches scraped against each other, like fingers brushing across skin. I blinked, and the smile widened, not in unison with my own lips. It was deliberate. I swallowed, a dry rasp in my throat. The puddle rippled, though the air was still. I reached toward it. My hand hovered above the water, trembling, and the reflection waved. Cold ran up my arm. I pulled back, heart hammering in the quiet. Every step I took seemed to echo twice, once in my ears, once beneath the fog. The reflection tilted its head, watching, patient. I tried to tell myself it was the fog, the distortion of water and light. But the eyes, they knew. They knew secrets I hadn't spoken aloud. A shiver climbed my spine, settling behind my ribs. The smile deepened, curling into something almost mocking. I crouched lower, staring hard, trying to find the edges of what was real. A drop of rain hit the puddle, and the reflection blinked, once long, deliberate. I hadn't moved. I wanted to look away, but my eyes wouldn't obey. It whispered without sound, a feeling that sank in my chest. Regret. The fog shifted. Something brushed my shoulder, soft, almost gentle. I spun, but nothing was there. When I looked back at the puddle, the reflection laughed. A hollow, echoing thing that vibrated beneath my skin. I stumbled back. The fog swallowed my path, curling around trees, hiding the world I knew. The reflection didn't chase me. It waited, patient, silent. My own reflection flickered, just once, before the puddle became water again. The pale sky stared back, empty, indifferent, but in the corner of my vision a shadow lingered. I kept moving, feet wet, heart uneven, eyes darting. Every rustle of leaves sounded like breathing. Every soft step behind me made me stop, freeze, listen. Nothing moved, and yet I knew it was there, waiting, patient, in the folds of fog. I could feel it smiling, just beyond perception, a cold weight pressing in. I didn't run. I couldn't. Something rooted me to the spot, a quiet dread that whispered of mistakes, of moments I couldn't undo. The puddle glimmered faintly in my memory, and in that memory I knew it was still smiling. I walked on. Fog wrapped around me, swallowing sound, swallowing light. But somewhere beneath the mist, beneath the pale and silent world, it waited, and I could never look away again. The alley smelled of damp brick and rotting leaves. Autumn had begun to bleed into winter. My breath hung in the air, pale and slow. I walked this path every day. Every crack and stone, every puddle, every rustle of stray paper was familiar. But tonight there was a door. It hadn't been there before. Not a door, not a seam, not a shadow of one. Just nothing. And now, a dark rectangle, framed in wet wood, whispering promises I didn't understand. I stopped. The air shifted around it. A faint hum, like someone breathing just behind my ear. I touched the handle. Cold, sharper than metal should ever feel. It sank into my palm like it wanted me to notice, wanted me to want it. I pulled my hand back. The alley seemed narrower now, walls leaning closer, damp bricks smelling sharper, heavier, almost alive. The door waited, silent and patient. I leaned closer, though it felt wrong, too smooth, almost liquid in texture. I swore I could see shadows moving beneath it, shapes stretching, pulling deeper than the alley. Not light, not darkness. Something in between. A sound brushed past me. Not footsteps, but a shuffle, faint and deliberate. From behind the door, or from inside me, I couldn't tell. The streetlights flickered. A thin fog curled at my ankles. Every step I took felt muffled. The ground seemed to shift beneath my feet, and the door remained still, waiting. I stared into the black beyond the threshold. It wasn't a hallway, not a room. It was nothing, yet everything, folding endlessly, a void with edges that trembled just out of focus. I wanted to look away, but my eyes, they wouldn't obey. I whispered, or thought I did. "Who's there?" The handle vibrated beneath my fingers. A soft, wet breath grazed my cheek. No one answered. I touched the door again. It moved slightly toward me, a pulse, slow and steady, like a heartbeat. The alley around me was silent now, swallowed by fog. The smell changed. Rotting leaves, ash, something sweet and coppery, like blood warmed in sunlight. I stepped back. Something pressed against my mind, a pull so soft I almost welcomed it. Curiosity, but edged with fear I couldn't name. The fog thickened, curling through my hair and into my clothes. I tried to breathe through it. The whispers rose, a susurration of words I almost recognized. Promises, names, things I'd lost. I felt the door, watching me, feeling me. A shadow shifted in the corner of my vision. Not a person, not a thing I could name. It flowed along the alley, brushing the walls, brushing me. I froze. Even the hum seemed to hold its breath. I wanted to leave. Every instinct screamed it, but my feet were rooted. And still, the door whispered. A hand, my hand, or something wearing it, slid along the frame. Cold, wet yet tender. The world beyond seemed to ripple, edges curling inward, stretching away into impossible space. I felt the air change again. The alley shrinking, or maybe I was expanding. I couldn't tell. Time had thinned. The fog had thickened. I stepped back. The door remained. Patient. Waiting. Silent now, but I could still hear it. Beneath my ribs. Behind my eyes. Always there, always calling. I walked on. The alley returned to itself as if nothing had happened. The door was gone. No seam in the bricks, no handle, no whisper. But the memory clung. Cold metal in my palm. The endless void. Soft, wet breath against my neck. And the promise that the next time I pass, it will be waiting again. I keep walking past the alley. Every day, I keep walking. But I can't help looking. Because somewhere, just out of reach, the door waits. The night was unusually still. A thin fog drifted between the trees, curling around the trunks like fingers. I could hear my own boots pressing into the damp earth, each step muted beneath the haze. Branches scraped against one another, whispering faintly. At first, I thought it was the wind, but the wind had stopped. Soft laughter. A single, delicate thread of it, weaving through the trees. It wasn't human. I would have known, yet it was unmistakably there, circling, coming closer, then retreating. I paused. The air felt heavier, colder, almost wet against my skin. Each inhale smelled like moss and decay, and something older, metallic, lurking beneath. The trees shifted, or maybe I shifted. I couldn't tell where I ended and the forest began. The laughter followed me. To my left, behind a hollow oak. To my right, from somewhere deeper, darker. Every direction carried the same hollow amusement, echoing as though the forest itself was aware. I tried to call out. My voice caught in my throat. It felt wrong to speak. So I stayed silent. A branch snapped. My heartbeat thumped in response, painfully loud. The fog thinned just enough to reveal shadows that weren't mine. They flickered at the edges of my vision. I blinked. Gone. The laughter had softened. Or maybe it was just waiting. I moved forward. Each step felt like crossing a threshold, deeper into something sentient. The mist clung to my clothes. The air pressed against my ears in low hums, almost like breathing. I stopped by a fallen log. The bark was slick, cold under my hands. A shiver ran down my spine. From somewhere above, the branches rustled. No wind, no animal, just movement. The laughter returned, closer now, but quiet, patient. It wound around me like smoke. I could feel it in my chest, rising, curling, pressing lightly, as if the forest itself were breathing me in. I wanted to run, but my legs refused. A pale light shimmered between the trunks. Not from the moon. This was different. Soft, blurred, shimmering. I reached toward it. The air tingled on my fingertips, electric and damp. I spun. The laughter came from everywhere at once. I thought I saw figures, tiny glimpses, vanishing before recognition. No eyes, no faces, just shapes that laughed softly, echoing against bark and soil. The forest felt aware. I could hear its patience, its curiosity. It wasn't just the trees, the leaves, the fog. It was listening, watching, waiting. I pressed my back to a tree. It was rough beneath my skin, grounding me. The laughter slowed, coiling, retreating, teasing. It circled once more. Then silence. I exhaled. Mist settled over my shoulders like a shawl. Every footstep I had taken seemed to vanish behind me. The world felt smaller. Or I felt larger, intruding. Something shifted behind a cluster of ferns. I caught movement in the corner of my eye. A shadow, flitting, delicate. I dared not turn. The silence now was heavier than any noise. I walked, careful, softly, each step a negotiation with something ancient, patient. The fog thinned and thickened, pulling at my hair, brushing my face. Each breath felt borrowed. And then, just before I thought I might escape, it laughed again, quiet, gentle, almost amused. From nowhere, from everywhere. I stumbled into a clearing. The pale light was gone. The trees stood still. The fog clung low to the ground. I was alone. The laughter lingered, faint, at the edges of memory, as if the forest had allowed me to leave. For now, I felt its eyes on my back as I walked. Soft footsteps followed in spirit, not sound. The forest exhaled behind me. And I kept moving, careful not to breathe too loudly, careful not to call attention. I was alive. For now, the night pressed in thick. Cold air pulled around the edges of the abandoned building. Fog curled along the cracked pavement. I had wandered here before, alone, drawn by the hollow quiet. Now, the wind felt heavier, heavier than it had any right to be, rustling above me. At first, I thought it was the loose metal sheets, swaying with the breeze. Then steps, soft, deliberate, pausing, a pattern. I froze. The hairs along my neck stood in straight lines. Each pause in my breath matched the pause above. I lifted my head. Moonlight spilled across the roof, pale and hesitant. Nothing moved, yet the shadows shifted, subtle, fluid, pacing. They matched my eyes, my pulse, my silent panic. A loose tile grown under a weight that wasn't there. I could feel it vibrating through the soles of my shoes. The fog seemed to thicken with every step I imagined. I counted 1, 2, 1, 2, the rhythm that mirrored mine. Silence stretched, not the quiet of a room. The quiet that waits, folds and on itself listens. My ears caught the faintest scrape along metal. A breath, though it wasn't mine, brushed my cheek. I wanted to move. Every muscle screamed, but my feet refused. I tried to focus on the air. Cold, damp, clinging to my skin. Tried to convince myself it was wind. Wind does not hesitate. Wind does not match your pauses. A shadow flickered near the edge. It wasn't long, not tall, just a presence that lingered. The way a leaf drifts in a sudden draft. I blinked. It was gone, but the steps remained, echoing, or perhaps not. The building groaned beneath me. I imagined it whispering secrets I wasn't meant to hear. Every stair, every crack, every hollow corner seemed alive. And above, footsteps. Still above me, moving without pause. I caught the scent, metallic, sharp, like iron and rain combined. It made my throat tighten, made the hair on my forearms lift. Each inhale felt borrowed. I edged closer to the stairwell. Soft concrete crumbled beneath my hands. The echo of it bounced upward, matching the rhythm, or breaking it. I could not tell. The fog thickened at the roofline, swallowing shadows. But the pacing never faltered. Not one step skipped. It lingered in the gaps of my awareness, filling the spaces between heartbeats. I whispered my own name. The wind stole it. I whispered again, louder this time. The steps stuttered, just for a moment, then resumed. Steady, quiet. A chill ran down my spine. Or maybe it was the building itself. Breath misted in front of me, but I had not exhaled. I could see my own pulse in the reflection of a cracked window pane. And just beyond, movement, ever so slight, as if the shadows were tasting the air. I crouched, willing myself smaller. The fog licked my ankles. The steps slowed, hesitant now. I dared to raise my head. Nothing. But I knew. Somewhere above, someone or something was watching. Every pause I took, it mirrored. Time fractured. Minutes became a single stretch of cold air, thick and unyielding. The footsteps faded, just enough to make me believe they had left. But the silence, it remained. Heavy, expectant. I didn't move. I couldn't. Every fiber of my body was tuned to the empty spaces where the steps had been. And then a final pause. A shadow, taller now, pressing against the pale moonlight at the roof's edge. Still, waiting. I backed toward the stairwell. Soft concrete crumbled under each careful step. The fog swallowed me as I descended. The night exhaled behind me. And somewhere above, steps resumed. But I could no longer hear them. Only the echo in my chest. The night was cold, the fog thick against the dim streetlights. My coat was too thin, but I kept walking, footsteps muffled in the wet leaves. Every corner smelled of damp earth and distant smoke. The house appeared first as a shadow, hulking and still. Boards nailed across the windows, gray and splintered. But even in the darkness, something felt alive. A crack in the boards caught my eye. A flicker of pale, white. 2 pinpoints. Watching. I stopped. They vanished when I stared. I blinked, rubbed my eyes. A shiver rose along my spine. The boards groaned. Softly, like a sigh carried from somewhere deep inside the walls. It was as if the house itself was breathing. I stepped closer. The smell of wet wood and rot drifted toward me. My hands itched to touch the boards, to see if it was real. The eyes returned, pale, round, and unblinking, but always at the edge of vision, always slipping away. I whispered to myself, though I barely heard the words. "Who's there?" Nothing answered, just the sighing boards and my own uneven breath. The street was empty. Fog wrapped the street lamp in a soft halo. I could hear a rustling, something small, deliberate, just behind the house. I leaned in closer. The boards shivered under my touch. A faint warmth, or was it heat from something alive, rose through the splintered wood. The eyes, they weren't human. Too pale, too hollow, too certain, like they knew every step I had ever taken. I stepped back. The boards groaned louder, almost protesting. I could feel the air vibrating with it, like a quiet hum in my chest. Every shadow stretched longer. Branches tapped against the windows in uneven rhythms, and the fog thickened, curling around my ankles. I thought I heard whispering, not words I could understand, just breath, soft and urgent. It skimmed the edges of my ears, teasing warning. I wanted to run. My feet refused. I only moved a little, inching along the sidewalk, eyes never leaving the crack. The eyes blinked, and for a moment I thought they smiled. But when I blinked back, they were gone again. Nothing but the sighing boards and the fog pressing close. I pressed my palm against the house. The wood was cold, damp, alive beneath my fingers. A pulse, almost human. Something shifted inside. A silhouette, vague but unmistakable, brushing behind the boards. I froze, inhaling the scent of wet timber and something metallic. Blood? Rust? I couldn't tell. The wind rose, rattling the loose boards. It whispered through the cracks, carrying my name, or maybe just what my mind wanted to hear. Soft footsteps echoed inside the house, pacing, circling. I wanted to look away, to walk faster, but my eyes kept drifting. To the crack, to the hollow gaze. Then silence. No sighing boards. No wind. No rustle. Just fog curling against my ankles, soft and suffocating. I felt watched. Every hair on my neck stiffened. The street lamp flickered, and for a heartbeat, the eyes were on me. Full, hollow, unblinking. I stumbled backward. A board groaned. A soft breath brushed past my cheek, warm and wet. When I looked back again, the crack was empty. The house sat silent, dead. Boards solid and unmoving. The fog swallowed the street. I kept walking, shoulders tense, ears straining for any hint of movement behind me. But nothing followed. Still I could feel it, the gaze. Hollow, pale, patient, waiting for me to look again. I never did. The night pressed in. Cold, damp, quiet. But sometimes, when the wind shifts just right, I swear I see them. Pale eyes, blinking from a crack I'm too afraid to approach. And the boards, sighing. The night was unusually still. Fog clung to the edges of the street, thick and soft, swallowing the lamplight. I sat alone in the kitchen, the radio humming quietly beside me. It wasn't unusual for it to crackle. Old radios did that. But this was different. A softness rolled out first. Then a pause. Then a voice. My name. It was fragile, almost shy, curling around the static like smoke. I froze, hand hovering over the dial. Just interference, I told myself. But my pulse tightened. I checked the antenna. Every wire, every connection. Nothing was wrong. Nothing should have been on. The voice returned. A whisper threaded through the static. My name, again, soft, insistent. The silence afterward felt hollow, like the house itself had stopped breathing. I held my breath, listening. The hum of the fridge, the drip from the tap, all felt distant, as if filtered through something thick. I tried turning the radio off. Click. Still there. Static clung to the speakers. And my name. I walked through the living room, barefoot on the cold floor. Each step a soft thud, a rhythm too loud in the quiet. The fog pressed against the window, pale and watching. I leaned close to the radio. The voice didn't rise, didn't fall, just a constant, careful whisper. Every syllable a finger brushing my spine. I tried to trace it. No source in the walls. No signal on any device. Even my phone stayed silent. I sat back down, hands trembling slightly. The static was no longer just noise. It felt alive, shifting, waiting. The room seemed larger, emptier, stretched by the absence of sound between the whispers. I could hear the wind now. Or maybe it wasn't the wind. Soft rustling, almost behind me. I didn't turn. I couldn't. The radio softened, then stopped. The silence was thick, full of something unsaid. I pressed my ear against it. Nothing. I reached for the kitchen window. Fog pressed against the glass, cold and damp. My reflection stared back, pale and sharp. The house sighed around me. Or maybe it was me. A faint hum returned. Not the radio. From the walls. From somewhere else. It spoke no words. But the shape of my name lingered in it. I wanted to leave. But the door felt distant, as if the hallway had stretched. The floor creaked with each step I didn't take. I was trapped between the static and the silence that followed. Minutes passed. Or hours. Time felt soft, like fog folding on itself. The radio remained still. No whispers, only the memory of them. I finally sat back down, hands pressed on my knees, breath shallow. The fog outside shifted. A shadow passed behind it. I didn't move. It lingered, patient. The hum faded. The house exhaled around me. And I waited, listening for something I couldn't name. My name would come again. I knew it, soft, insistent, like a promise in the dark. The radio remained silent. For now, the street was empty. A pale fog clung to the lampposts. My breath came out in soft clouds, barely stirring the still air. I noticed it first in the shop window. My shadow, long and thin, stretched across the cracked pavement, but it moved differently. A curl here, a twitch there. It bent around corners that didn't exist. It leaned toward shapes I couldn't see. I stopped walking. The night felt heavier, as though it were holding its breath. The fog wrapped around my legs, cold and damp. In another window, I saw it again. Not my reflection. A stranger stood behind me, pale, featureless, waiting. I turned. No one, only the empty street and the whisper of my own footsteps. I tried to tell myself it was a trick. The light, the fog, tired eyes. But the shadow didn't lie. It slid along walls and doors, reaching into corners I couldn't reach. At home, I checked every mirror. The stranger was always there, watching, flickering in and out of the edges of glass. I moved closer to the window, my hand pressed against the cold pane. I could feel a soft hum, like static under my skin. The stranger's eyes met mine for a heartbeat, then vanished. Even the walls felt wrong. Shadows pulled in corners, curling like smoke. I could hear them shift when I wasn't looking. In the kitchen, I poured water from the tap. It rattled in the glass, small and hollow. I froze. My shadow moved first, bending toward the hallway, reaching past the edge of light. I backed away. It followed, curled closer, slower, patient. Always patient. I tried leaving the room. Every doorway led me back to the same place. The stranger in the reflection, the shadow twisting in impossible ways. I could feel them, both smelling, listening, waiting. I sat on the floor, knees against my chest. The hum grew softer, closer, like it was breathing with me. The fog outside the window thickened, curling under the streetlight. A rustling I couldn't place drifted through the room. Something small, deliberate, moving along the edges of my vision. I wanted to close my eyes. I wanted to sleep, but the shadow coiled along the floorboards. The stranger leaned closer in the glass, and even behind closed eyelids, I could feel them. Time became liquid. Minutes stretched and cracked. I heard the soft scrape of fingernails, or maybe it was just my imagination. It echoed along the walls, brushing the corners, whispering. The air grew colder, my breath heavier, and in the fog outside, shapes moved just beyond recognition. I could almost make out figures bending toward the street, toward me, but they never came. Finally, I sat very still. The shadow lay flat, inert, or perhaps pretending. The stranger blinked once, then disappeared behind the glass. I exhaled, a long, shivering release. The hum faded. Only my own breath remained, soft and uneven. The fog began to lift. I didn't look behind me. I didn't need to. The shadow waited. The stranger waited. And somewhere in the silence, I knew the watching would never end. The air was damp, heavy with the scent of wet earth. The sky was pale, the kind of gray that presses against your eyes. I had walked this path countless times, yet today it felt different. The tree stood alone at the edge of the clearing. Its bark was dark, almost black, streaked with streaks of silver that glinted in the soft light. Even from a distance, it hummed. I paused. A faint vibration, like someone speaking beneath my skin. I shook my head. There was no one, but the whispers, they were mine. Or maybe they weren't. They echoed the thoughts I hadn't spoken aloud. Don't go closer, it seemed to say. I didn't move. The branches swayed gently, though the wind had stilled hours ago. A soft rustling, like the memory of leaves brushing against themselves. Curiosity drew me in. My fingers brushed the bark. Cold, hard, alive. A shiver ran through my arm, curling into my chest. It wasn't pain. It was acknowledgement. I stepped back. A wordless conversation settled in the pit of my stomach. The whispers grew louder, yet no lips moved. They matched the rhythm of my heartbeat, tilting from thought to thought. My own mind felt borrowed. I circled the tree. Shadows stretched long, brushing the ground like pale fingers. Every step was heavier than the last. The humming pulsed beneath my feet, threading through the soil. I tried to leave. My legs moved slowly, but my eyes, they lingered. Every crack in the bark, every hollow nook, seemed to watch me. The whispers grew urgent, twisting into shapes I couldn't name. Then silence, not the absence of sound, but hollow paws that pressed against my ears. The branches froze midsway. The hum vanished. A single shiver ran along my spine. The bark beneath my fingertips quivered. A voice, soft, almost tender, pressed into my skull. It spoke in my own timbre, mimicking thoughts I didn't dare think aloud. I stumbled backward. The ground was slick, moss damp against my shoes. The tree's shadow stretched, leaning toward me with subtle hunger. And still no wind. I whispered a name I hadn't said in years. The tree repeated it, but slower, like it was savoring the sound. I tried to laugh, but it came out as a shuddered breath. The air smelled of rain, of old wood, of something forgotten. Time slipped, minutes folded over themselves. The sky dimmed, pale light turning into gray, suffocating gray. I could feel it watching, learning, matching each heartbeat. Every intention, every hidden fear, mirrored back at me in trembling echoes. I touched the bark again, just once. The shiver ran deeper this time, twisting into something that felt like memory. Not mine, yet familiar. It hummed against my thoughts, soft and insistent. I stepped back. The clearing stretched, wider than it should be, emptier. The tree swayed lightly, though nothing moved it. The whispers faded to static, lingering just beyond comprehension. I left without looking back. The fog thickened around the edges of the path. Branches brushed against themselves in silence. I could still feel the hum, faint under my skin. Even now, when I close my eyes, I hear it. The tree, remembering my thoughts better than I do. The soft, knowing shiver when my fingers brush the bark. The whispering tree, standing alone in the gray, waiting. The path was narrow. Twisted roots curled up like fingers across the dirt. A pale light lingered between the trees, faint and trembling. Each step I took answered me. Or maybe it answered itself. A single footfall, then another, echoing, delayed. It never matched perfectly. Sometimes slower, sometimes lingering a fraction behind. The air was cold, damp. It smelled like wet leaves and old wood. A faint rustle stirred from the undergrowth, though nothing moved. I tightened my grip on the straps of my bag. The echoes continued, one after the other, folding over themselves. I tried to keep pace. Step, 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 but the path felt wrong. Longer than it should be. I passed a bend I thought I'd already crossed. The shadows leaned closer. There was another rhythm now. Something walking behind me, imitating me, step for step. But every time I glanced back, there was nothing. Just darkness stretching into itself, endless and quiet. I slowed. Step, pause, step, pause. The echoes multiplied. They came from everywhere and nowhere at once. I pressed my hands to my ears, hoping the echoes would stop. They didn't. They only grew heavier, like water pooling in a hollow. A breeze drifted across the path, carrying the scent of damp earth. It rustled the leaves softly, whispering against my neck. I imagined a shape there, always just out of sight. A silhouette folding into the darkness, copying me. I tried to run. Footsteps followed. A single step ahead, 2 behind, 3 overlapping, out of sync. The echoes twisted in the air, so sharp I could feel them pressing into my chest. The ground felt strange underfoot, soft, then hard, then soft again, like the path itself was breathing. My shoes left marks that disappeared almost immediately. I looked back once more. Nothing, only the path stretching, longer than memory, curving beyond comprehension. A bird cried somewhere far off. Its sound was thin, fragile, swallowed by the layering echoes. I imagined it trembling in fear like I was, but I was not supposed to be afraid. I told myself that over and over. Step, echo, echo, step. The rhythm was relentless, unyielding. I noticed the faintest vibration beneath my feet, almost like a hum in the earth. It rose and fell with my heartbeat. I stopped. The echoes did not. They went on, bouncing along the path, folding over themselves. One echo, 2, 3, and then a new one just behind, darker, longer. I moved again, slowly, each step measured. My breath left clouds in the cold, mingling with the damp fog that had begun to settle. The fog softened the edges of the trees, softened the edges of the world, softened me. I heard a twig snap. I didn't move. Another. I realized I was not alone, though I could see nothing. Not a shadow, not a flicker. Just presence. It didn't breathe. It didn't speak. It simply echoed, layer upon layer, until I felt it in my bones. I imagined the figure walking just behind me, perfectly synchronized, except for a slight delay, always a step or 2 out of alignment. I tried to speed up. It sped up. I slowed. It slowed. The path seemed endless. Each bend revealed another bend. Each step left a mark that vanished immediately. The fog pressed against my face, cold and wet, smelling faintly of moss and decay. The echoes laughed, soft and hollow. I could not tell if it was the wind, or me, or the thing behind me. Finally, I stopped. I closed my eyes. The echoing stopped for a heartbeat, and then it returned, multiplied, layered, infinite. I wanted to run. I wanted to disappear, but the path had swallowed the beginning and the end. All I could do was take another step. Step, echo, echo, and somewhere behind, a presence mirrored me. Not watching, not waiting, just walking. I walked on. The path stretched forever, and the echoes followed. The fog rolled in slow, thick, curling around the streetlights like a pale hand. The night smelled of wet asphalt and something iron-heavy, a taste that lingered on my tongue. I walked, my footsteps soft, swallowed almost immediately by the hush of the mist. A shadow flickered ahead. Or maybe it was only the fog playing tricks. The air grew colder, each breath pulling metallic tang into my lungs. Something shifted. A shape emerged in the gray, pale and still. I blinked, trying to focus. A face, blank, expressionless, eyes empty, yet heavy with weight. It drifted closer, slow, silent. Every instinct told me to step back, but my legs refused. The puddles along the street reflected something wrong. Not my face. Mine was there, but twisted, too wide, too hollow. The skin stretched in over bones that didn't feel like mine. I bent closer. The reflection wavered like water itself was breathing, pulsing beneath my gaze. The fog thickened again. The face, floating toward me, dissolved before I could hold it in focus. I blinked, just missed, but the taste in my mouth stayed. Iron like blood, like rust. I rubbed my lips, but it lingered, clinging to the edges of my teeth. I wanted to move, but my feet felt heavy, sunk into invisible mud. The streetlights flickered, pale light trembling over wet asphalt, over puddles that mirrored me wrongly. The world had grown too quiet. A sound came then, soft, rustling, behind me, close enough to stir the hair at the nape of my neck. I turned. Nothing, only fog, crawling along the ground, curling around the curb like smoke from a fire that had never burned. I forced my gaze forward. The face returned, just for a moment, pale and patient. No mouth, no nose, only eyes that held the darkness inside the mist. I reached out. My hand passed through. Cold, wet, not quite water, not quite air. I stumbled backward, nearly falling into another puddle. My reflection stared back, wrong in ways I couldn't name. A shiver ran down my spine, threading through every nerve, but the fog was patient, surrounding me, pressing lightly, like it wanted to swallow my small, trembling shape. I tried to speak. No words came, just a metallic tang in my throat, a pulse in the fog, moving with the rhythm of something unseen. The face floated nearer again, slower this time, deliberate, and then, before I could comprehend, vanished, gone, only mist, only breath, only the soft, echoing hum of nothing. I stared at the puddle at my feet. My reflection blinked, and for a heartbeat it smiled. I knew I had not. I turned. The street was empty. The fog rolled thicker now, heavier, smelling of wet iron, hiding corners I did not dare see. Each step I took felt mirrored in silence, a shadow I could not escape. The night waited, and I walked, tasting the metallic air, staring into puddles that showed faces that weren't mine. The fog moved with me, patient, pale, expressionless. I could not tell if it wanted to follow, or if it had always been here. I could only keep walking, listening to the quiet, tasting the rawness in the air, feeling my own face shift in reflection, until the world itself seemed uncertain. The fog did not fade. It only waited. The alley smelled of wet stone and rust. A pale drizzle slicked the bricks beneath my shoes. Fog curled around the corners, soft, persistent. I saw the door first as a shadow. Dark wood, narrow, leaning just slightly off kilter. It felt wrong, like it shouldn't be there. I reached for the handle. Cold, smooth, the metal bit into my palm. I pulled, expecting resistance. It swung open. Inside a hall that shouldn't exist. Light flickered along impossibly high ceilings. Walls stretched further than the alley could hold. The air smelled faintly of smoke and something sweet. Something decayed. I tried to close it, but it wouldn't stay. It pushed against my hand, soft but stubborn. A low hum seemed to rise from the wood itself. I stepped inside. The alley vanished behind me. Each step warped the world. The puddles outside reflected stars that weren't there. A fog pressed close, warm, almost alive. The hallway twisted. Corners bent in ways my mind didn't trust. Floorboards moaned underfoot. I touched the walls. They pulsed softly, like a heartbeat beneath paint. A door appeared to my left. I turned the handle. Another hall, brighter this time. The walls smelled like old paper, mildew curling in the corners. Every step changed the air. The alley outside no longer felt real. Windows reflected not my face, but shadows, pale, thin, moving where I wasn't. I tried to close the first door again. It swung open immediately. Laughter, quiet, almost hesitant, drifted from the hallway. I couldn't tell if it was behind me or ahead. I followed the sound. Each footstep echoed too long, stretching into nothing. The hall narrowed. I brushed against the walls. They left a residue of cold ash on my fingers. I stopped, breath shallow, a faint rustling above, as if the ceiling had wings. I leaned close to the wall. I could hear my heart beat in the hollow spaces between the boards. Another door. I hesitated. Curiosity, slow, clinging. I pushed it. The hall opened into endless glass. Reflections of myself, of the alley of the fog, multiplying, fracturing, staring. Each reflection blinked a second too late, a second too long. I wanted to step back, but the floor had shifted. A soft pull, subtle, insistent, toward the hall center. I was not walking. I was being drawn. I touched the glass. Cold, impossibly smooth. My hand vanished inside for a heartbeat, then jerked back. The reflection grinned. Not me. I ran, or thought I ran. The hall bent beneath my feet. Every turn brought me face to face with another door, all closed, all breathing. I pressed my hands to the first door. It yielded this time, but the hallway inside was no longer the same. It shimmered, unstable, whispering. I backed out. Finally, the alley returned. Fog thick, wet, pressing against my neck. But the door, it leaned there, patient, waiting. I tried once more. It moved when I touched it. Soft footsteps echoed behind me. But no one was there. I left it. The alley smelled of wet stone and rust. The door waited. And I couldn't forget it. The streetlights were dim, flickering in the cold, late autumn air. Leaves skittered across the asphalt, whispering as they moved. The houses looked the same, yet wrong. I paused. A corner I knew well twisted into something I didn't recognize. The bakery, once pale and welcoming, now leaned, windows dark and empty. I could almost smell the sugar still, lingering under something stale. Each step I took made the pavement groan. Soft footsteps behind me. Or maybe they were mine, echoing differently. I stopped. Silence stretched, but it was heavy, almost waiting. A street sign I passed nightly now bore letters I couldn't read. Familiar names blurred. The fog curled around the lamps, thick and pale, hiding shapes that weren't there before. My hands itched to touch something solid, something real. But the brick felt colder than memory, rough as ash. I could hear it then. A shuffle, low and careful, keeping pace with me. Not close, not far, just enough to make my chest tighten. Windows stared back at me, pale eyes reflecting nothing. A shadow lingered behind a curtain, still as breath. I blinked, and it was gone, or I was too slow. I couldn't tell which terrified me more. The alley I always cut through opened into a courtyard I didn't remember. Cracked concrete, weeds curling like fingers through the gaps. Something wet underfoot. Rain, maybe, or something older. The air carried a hum, faint, like a memory vibrating under my skin. I slowed, every sense sharpened, catching the curl of something unseen in the corner of my vision. A pulse in the dark, brushing against the back of my neck. The smell of smoke, faint, not fire, but something burned anyway. The church I passed every morning, its steeple leaning toward me, looked taller, thinner, its bells silent, though I could feel a deep resonance in the ground. I wanted to turn back, but the path behind me changed, twisting, slipping, swallowing what I just walked past. A whisper grazed my ear, or perhaps it was a wind, carrying my own voice back to me. I could feel it pressing, tracing me from place to place. Soft, patient, unrelenting. I quickened my steps, trying to convince myself it wasn't following. My home should have been a warm glow at the end of the street, but the windows were dark. The door sagged in its frame, breathing like it remembered a different hand. I reached out. The wood trembled under my fingers, faint vibration like a heartbeat that didn't belong to me. I thought I heard the soft scrape of nails against the porch. But when I looked, the night had swallowed everything again. I wanted to scream, but only a whisper came out. The silence answered me, cold, endless. Inside, the rooms were the same shape, but wrong. Furniture slightly shifted. Shadows lay where they shouldn't. The air smelled faintly of iron, wet and sharp. I could feel it around me, brushing my skin, warm then cold, then gone. I turned in a slow circle. Every familiar object, desk, chair, photograph, faded under a pale light I didn't remember. And then I felt it clearly. Not a shadow this time, not just an echo. Something had been walking behind me all night. It didn't make a sound, just a presence. Thick, patient, waiting for me to notice. I sat down on the edge of the bed. The room trembled, soft, like a distant train. I wanted to close my eyes. I wanted to forget. But the feeling stayed, heavy in my chest, curling through my ribs. The night outside pressed against the windows. I could hear the street, breathing, stretching, moving as if alive. and somewhere beyond, saw footsteps, mine or not, kept pace. I lay down. The ceiling above was pale and still, but I knew it wasn't safe. I held my breath, waiting. The last patrol had ended, and something had followed me home. The street was empty. Fog curled around the lampposts, pale light bleeding into the damp asphalt. I stopped at the intersection, engine ticking as it cooled. My hands rested lightly on the wheel. The night felt too still. Even the wind held its breath. I leaned back slightly. Then it came, a cold brush, quick and soft, against the back of my neck. I froze. No one was there. I turned slowly. Shadows pooled along the sidewalks, stretching unnaturally, curling toward me like dark fingers. The hum of distant traffic felt muffled. A street lamp flickered above. The shadows shivered with it. I swallowed. The air smelled damp, like wet concrete and earth. And something else, something faintly metallic, like old iron, lingering just under my skin. My heartbeat filled my ears. I wanted to move, but my limbs felt thick, heavy, sluggish. The fog pressed close, dampening my thoughts. Then a whisper, or maybe just a sigh, brushed my cheek. I couldn't tell if it came from the air or from inside me. The shadows shifted again. They leaned, swayed as if searching. Every streetlight reflected a new, impossible angle, a space where shadows shouldn't exist. I tried to focus on the pavement, on the cracked white lines of the crosswalk, but the edges blurred. Everything seemed to breathe, just slightly, like it was alive. My breath caught. I could almost feel another heartbeat, soft, hidden against the night. I glanced around quickly, too quickly. The silence pressed back, thick and suffocating. A distant door slammed, echoed across the empty street. I jumped. The shadows didn't move. They only seemed to watch, curling closer with each exhale. I rubbed my neck. Cold, barely touched my skin. But it was there, lingering like the memory of someone I once knew. I wanted to drive, but I couldn't. My car felt anchored, heavy with the fog and the waiting. Time slowed. A second stretched into minutes. The street lamp above flickered again, longer this time, and the shadows leaned farther into the light. I saw shapes, almost faces, but not quite, eyes that weren't eyes, staring, waiting. I whispered to myself, barely moving my lips. Just shadows. Just shadows. But even my voice sounded thin, swallowed by the night. A rustling behind the curb made me stiffen. The fog twisted there, pale and quivering. And then I felt it again, the breath, closer this time, curling along my spine. My stomach sank. I knew I was alone. But alone didn't feel safe anymore. Alone meant something could lean in without warning. I looked down at my hands, clutching the steering wheel, fingers pale, shaking. The air smelled colder now, sharper. And somehow I knew it wasn't wind. The shadows stretched farther, edges of light warped. The quiet pressed harder. Every instinct screamed to move, but the car wouldn't start. I thought of the day's mistakes, the words left unsaid, the paths I didn't take. Each memory pressed into me, heavier than the fog. The breath lingered, soft, insistent. A reminder I couldn't place, couldn't name, but could feel deep in my chest. The street lamp went out. Dark swallowed everything, thick as velvet. I blinked. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then, slowly, the shadows retracted, slinking back into corners, cracks, and the fog. I was alone, truly, but the memory of that cold, quiet breath, it stayed. Heavy, pressing, impossible to shake. I started the car. Engine hummed weakly. The fog drifted past the windshield. Shadows stretched behind me, but no one followed. I drove, slowly. The streetlights flickered one last time, and then silence. The memory of the breath on my neck didn't fade. It didn't need to. Some things wait for you, even when the street is empty, even when you're finally moving. The streetlight flickered once, twice, and then it steadied, pale and weak, spilling a circle of light over cracked asphalt. I stood beneath it, shoulders stiff, breath curling in the cold night. Everything beyond the halo of brightness had vanished. Houses I knew gone. The shop with the green door. Just fog. Even the familiar hum of distant traffic had died. The fog hung low, thick, curling around the light, like smoke from a candle long extinguished. It moved softly, deliberately, between the empty spaces. I thought I could see shapes in it. Shadows that shouldn't obey gravity. Shadows that stretched, twisted, then disappeared when I blinked. A crow cawed somewhere far behind me. Or maybe closer. The sound made my chest tighten. I wanted to turn, to run, but my feet felt glued to the street. The fog whispered at the edges of my mind, brushing against my skin, cold and wet. I remember the old oak tree at the corner of Maple Street. It should have been here, roots deep and gnarled. But it wasn't. Nothing was. Only fog, and the lonely halo of the streetlight. Soft footsteps. Not mine. They echoed beneath the light, but not across the asphalt. They were everywhere and nowhere. I held my breath. A shiver ran down my spine. The light above me hummed low, a constant pulse. It cast long, trembling shadows that danced just beyond comprehension. I leaned forward slightly, straining to see shapes in the fog. They moved like the fog itself was alive, curling around invisible bodies, reaching for something. I touched the metal pole of the streetlight, cold, biting, electric under my fingers. It felt solid yet strange, like a memory I couldn't fully remember. I pressed my forehead against it. The fog wrapped around my hair, my clothes, filling my lungs with misty heaviness. A street I used to walk every morning appeared, briefly, through the haze. Pavement wet, puddles reflecting nothing but gray. The mailboxes leaned in unnatural angles. And in one puddle I saw my reflection, but it wasn't mine. Eyes darker, skin paler, lips trembling without movement. I stepped back. The reflection melted into the fog, leaving only silence. A soft rustling passed behind me. I turned slowly. Nothing. Time had stopped, or maybe it had never existed here. Each breath I drew sounded loud, harsh, too human for this place. I wanted to call out. I wanted someone, anything, to respond, but the fog swallowed my voice before it formed. I remembered the small park bench near the bakery. I had sat there countless times. I walked, or thought I did. The ground beneath me felt different, unreal. The fog moved around my ankles, alive, whispering shapes I could almost understand. Something shifted in the corner of my eye. A shadow, not cast by the light, skittered along the edge of the street. It paused, just beyond the circle of illumination. Then it moved closer, slowly. I didn't run. I couldn't. I could only watch. The streetlight flickered again. Shadows quivered and bent toward me. The fog pulsed like a living thing, breathing, hungry. I felt a hand of chill graze my cheek. I didn't flinch. Acceptance was heavier than fear. And then silence. Complete, absolute. The hum of the light. The pulse of fog. And me, standing alone, watching. I thought about leaving. I thought about turning my back to the light and walking into the void. But something in the fog held me here. Soft, insistent, patient. I realized then that nothing would return. The familiar streets, the lights, the warm smell of rain on asphalt, all gone. Only the fog, only the shadows, only the light. I closed my eyes, breathed, and let the fog curl around me. The light hummed low, a lullaby I could almost sleep to. Almost. I would never leave. Not really. And somehow that was enough. The fog pressed closer. Shadows leaned in. And I waited, alone, under the pale, flickering light.